We should get going. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this session as part of Ukie Students Careers Insight Week. Delighted to welcome Chris Fitzpatrick here from EA. Chris is going to talk all about CVs and portfolios. Chris, without further ado, over to you.
Okie dokie. Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. I'll just repeat what he said. I'm Chris. I'm a programmer from EA. We're going to chat about portfolios and stuff. So what we're going to go through today, I'm going to tell you a quick bit about myself. Then we're going to go through CVs, portfolios, and interviews one by one, and try and give you a bit of a sense of how I use them and the things I pick up on as we go. I'm going to try my best not to repeat anything that you can read in the usual how to write CVs or portfolio talks. And I was actually just looking through the rest of the schedule for this week, and it looks like there's some specific talks on all of these elements that go a bit deeper, specifically on each thing. So go and check those out as well. We should also have a bunch of time at the end for questions. And also, if there are any non-programmers here this morning, don't worry. I realized as I went through this to quickly practice this morning that lots of what I've written is through the lens of programming, but everything is transferable. So if you're not a programmer, don't worry. Everything is relevant. Go. Cool. So briefly about myself. I went to college. I did A-levels in maths, further maths, physics, and computing, which got me onto the games programming course at University of Staffordshire. I did an industrial placement with a polymer analysis company, writing their analysis software. They didn't let me anywhere near the maths, though, because it was for medicines and I could kill someone, but I was doing all the other stuff. I also did a short placement with BMW for my master's project and graduated in 2012, which is far too long ago now. I joined Codemasters straight after graduation as a UI programmer, eventually moving to the physics group for a bunch of games like Dirt Rally, Grid Auto Sport, and most recently EA Sports WRC, looking after mostly the track physics and the damage systems. Later, I became the engine group lead for the development of WRC, and then later the lead programmer for its live service, which is really cool. Along the way, I've contributed to most of the programming disciplines, and I've worked closely with pretty much all of the content teams that we have. So a bit of a journey, and hopefully I can answer lots of your questions. So start firing away in the chat, and we'll go through them at the end. On with the advice. So before I get to the real specific stuff, this is possibly the most important thing. And that is to talk to as many people as you can about this and get their opinions too. There is no correct answer to anything that I'm about to say. Everyone has their own preferences. These are mine. This is just my experience of things as I've gotten involved in recruitment, the things that I've picked up on that could make things a bit easier for me, make things a bit easier for you. So just take everything with a healthy pinch of salt. So before I get into some tips, I thought I would tell you what I use CVs and portfolios for, and I'm sure it's similar to everybody else as well. There are two main uses for me: to answer some questions about you and prepare for the interview. So the first question is a bit brutal, but it's the truth, and it is it worth interviewing you? We get loads of applications for most roles, particularly internships, and we sadly don't have the time to talk to everyone as much as we want to. So we spend a lot of time looking through your portfolios, your CVs, looking at the sorts of projects that you've worked on, comparing them to the role, trying to think, do we think that you can do the job, or can you learn the job? Are the projects you've worked on relevant enough or technical enough to prove you're up to it? Do we think you have the skills we need? And this is a twofold thing. Do you have the technical ability to make games with us? But do you also have the soft skills? Can you work in a team? Are you able to communicate effectively? That sort of thing. And then lastly, do we feel that you want the job we're hiring for? I will come back to that bit in a couple of slides. If we've decided to go ahead with the interview, then I'll go through it again to work out what questions I need to ask you that are going to test you with familiar and unfamiliar topics and hopefully learn a little bit more about you as a person. We're also looking for things that will verify the CV to make sure that the person we're speaking to is the person that's in the CV. We're basically trying to work out if we should interview you, then what we should do in the interview, and combine that with all the other steps we have, like art tests, code tests, etc., to decide ultimately if we're going to hire you or not. So where should you get started with preparation for all this? Honestly, whichever is easier for you. I find the portfolio is the better place to start because you've got loads of room to chat about all of your awesome work and experience, and you've got loads of space to do that, which you can then use to build the CV afterwards. So I'll start there. Portfolios. There is no correct answer. I've said it twice. I'm going to say it again more times, I'm sure, as the presentation goes on, but there's no correct answer for what a portfolio should look like, but these are some basics that they should all have. Make sure it is presented in a way you can give it to someone to look at in their own time without you. Most people go with a website, which works super well, and it means you can update it. I'd probably suggest the same, but ultimately, whatever you can find that works. Make sure it contains all of your best work. Absolutely no filler. At this point in your career, it's likely going to include most of your academic work, which is fine. The rest of your work is still important, though, and we will come back to that in another slide or two. Make sure each project is demonstrated or has an explanation of what it is and why it's awesome. We aren't experts in everything, so you need to tell us what we're seeing, what you contributed to it, and why it's awesome. The portfolio also speaks to your ambition. So what I said on the previous slide about whether you want the job. If I'm looking for a C++ programmer and the lead project I find on your portfolio is an art project, you probably want to be an artist. Maybe you want to be a technical artist. It's not going to lose you the job, but it might be a point against you if we've got a big old pile of candidates to get through. May invite some awkward questions. So just keep that in mind. If you want to be a programmer or you want to be an artist, make sure that that is the thing that is front and center when I land on your portfolio. Otherwise you confuse us. Make sure it backs up and expands on your CV. Don't just reiterate your CV because you haven't added anything. So it's kind of, there wasn't much point going to your portfolio. This is your chance to tell us more detail about your projects and get us excited to talk to you about it and prove you have the skills we want. Make sure all of your CV projects appear in the portfolio as much as you can, and definitely add more to it than that, because we will have a dig around and find out as much as we can in the time that we have. You should be safe to assume a technical audience or someone familiar with your discipline is reading it. So you don't need to explain art composition from the ground up or programming for first principles. You can dive in and just talk about the thing that you've done. Make sure that you have some contact information or methods like LinkedIn or some professional contact information, just in case we stumble onto your portfolio from some other means. Maybe you've posted on some social media we've picked up and we go for a browse and then we want to get in touch. If you're comfy to have your CV available for download and maybe an email address or phone number on there, go for it, but just be careful because like you should protect your data. It is absolutely okay and very much encouraged to not broadcast your private information and sign yourself up to all of the spam. Just make sure that we can reach you in a reasonable fashion. So I usually suggest LinkedIn works very well for initial contact and email addresses. Make sure it's proofread. I'm going to say that a lot today as well, and I'm sure you'll hear that a lot from the other people speaking. Take as much care with this as you would with a CV. More so if you're a content creator, because your portfolio is probably the most important part of your application and where we're going to spend most of the time throughout the entire recruitment process. Also, finally, make sure that whatever you've made is trivial to use and understand. It shouldn't be a confusing puzzle to navigate and find your work, and I have seen some portfolios that are that. And you spend more time trying to navigate the maze than looking at the work, so try to avoid that. I've mentioned backing up your CV a few times. Basically, I mean, provide evidence for the things that you've mentioned in your CV and demonstrate them. I also said that we want to see your best work, but don't throw away the rest of the stuff, because the simple existence of some of it is important to mention and demonstrate some of the values that you've specified in the CV. So, for example, I see this phrase a lot in CVs, and that is, I'm a passionate individual actively improving my C++ on a regular basis. It can come across quite throwaway if you're not substantiating it. So when I see that phrase, what I want to see when I go to your portfolio or a GitHub page is where you're doing those weekly challenges or taking on extra side projects to practice your skills or pushing university assignments beyond their scope to include something extra that you want to learn. The individual projects themselves might not be portfolio worthy, but the bulk size of them together is an important demonstration for us. So absolutely make sure that they're there and maybe sort them into a supporting area of your portfolio that we can find to just know that it's a thing that you're doing. One of our past interns did that, and that's directly what got. My headset spontaneously decided to disconnect then. I'm back.
That's all right. Yep, no worries. I'm glad you're here. There we go.
So yes, one of our interns did this a couple of years ago, and it's directly what got them the job. They demonstrated not just the work, their primary portfolio pieces, but they had an area where they were demonstrating how they were pushing themselves forwards and trying to improve their programming skills to be ready for a games industry placement, which was awesome. If you said you work well in a team, we want to see those projects. Make sure there are some team projects in there anyway, and make sure that you state what you contributed to them. Likewise, if you say you're hyper organized, tell us about a time that you were. It could be you organized a massive group holiday, or you ran a game jam team, or anything like that. These are all like extra little portfolio pieces or things you can have in there which back everything up. Make your portfolio your own. So show off your skills, spend some real time on this because your portfolio is a portfolio piece in of itself. If you're an audio person, you could add music or sound effects based on what's going on, like as you mouse over things or as you dynamic music as you move between screens. UI artists, you could be creating assets to for the whole website itself, so it looks a little bit more professional and polished. Programmers, you could make it very technically impressive with lots of dynamic functionality and that sort of good stuff. Just whatever you do, make sure it is polished and that you've tested it as well as you possibly can. This is your chance, another chance to show off your practical skills, so don't pass it up. Be sure to use pictures, GIFs, videos, and sounds to show things off. I guarantee even the most non-visual project can be described with some pictures to show the mechanics of what's going on. It'll save you some words and it's going to make it faster for me to understand. I also asked some of our art and design leads for some tips for today, and they all basically said the same thing. They want to see your in-progress work as much as the finished piece, or I guess more precisely, maybe the build up to your finished piece as well as the finished piece. So showing us a cool character model you've made or a level you've designed is fantastic, but we want to see the process that brought that level to life as much as the finished thing. So what decisions did you make? The problems you hit while you were doing it? How were you creative, or were you solving new problems? How were you not just repeating some tutorial steps that you found on the internet somewhere, just like you would do on the job? The same goes for programmers. Be critical of your work and show us you want to grow and tell us about the good and the bad. I've already also mentioned that art and design, we're probably going to spend a solid chunk of the interview in your portfolio going through things. Feel free to include unrelated projects as well. So make sure, again, there's a clear separation between your I want to be a designer and other stuff, but definitely listen and talk about them because we want to learn about you as a person too, and you never know what might be useful, or shake something loose in our brains as part of your application. And have another concrete example of this, a designer joined us a few years ago, and they were evenly matched with another candidate, but this person's portfolio had a bunch of not game stuff in there as well. And it happened to line up with some of the other things that we had in mind. And so the broader set of experiences basically added to our already existing set of experiences. And so it gave them the edge and they got the job. We had the same thing with a technical artist. They'd done a bunch of audio work as part of some of their older projects. And it just happened to line up with some of our future plans for the current project we were on. So although it wasn't in the originally advertised role, it just inspired us to think in that direction. So we called them up again and had another little chat after their interview, like, hey, we spotted all this stuff. Is that something you would be interested to go back to, or would that be a deal breaker? And turns out they were very interested to have a go at some of that again. And so they ended up being this super candidate that had all the stuff we already wanted, plus a bunch of extra stuff that kind of made them even more attractive. So this could be anything that you're interested in. So 3D printing, music, art, acting, just tell us about it because it adds to you as a person. You also might not have one project that demonstrates you as a full package, which is totally fine. Don't worry. You can still paint the picture of you using lots of other ones. They also don't all have to be 100% shippable, polished to the nth degree things with full menu flows and final art and all that sort of stuff. For instance, if you're demonstrating an RPG character system, sure, some finished artwork to support it is going to be really nice, and maybe wrapping it up in a complete game. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with some cylinders for the characters and a set of plain progress bars on screen, because the stat system is the portfolio piece. That's the thing you're trying to demonstrate. So as long as you're demonstrating that thing well, fantastic. That's what we want to see. Okay, time for some entirely selfish suggestions now. These are going to help me when I'm looking at your portfolio, because sadly, I've mentioned before, I don't have a lot of time to deep dive into everything that you write in your CV and your portfolio. So any help that you can give me to smooth out finding the things that I'm interested in is greatly appreciated. And I do notice when students and grads do this sort of stuff. So we usually get your CV as a PDF or a Word document. So exploit the system. Make sure that your portfolio is a clickable link from within your CV and formatted as such. It's definitely not a deal breaker if you don't do it, but in Word, you have to actively stop it from making links clickable. So please take this as permission to just leave it as it is, leave it as a clickable link. It just smooths out that step for me when I'm trying to navigate your work. And if you can, embed links to your projects in your CV as you talk about them. So I can go from your CV, like reading about one cool experience, to your portfolio and directly to the page to learn more about it. And I know that I'm in the right place. If you can make it searchable so I can find what I'm after quickly, that's awesome. So again, if I'm looking for a C++ programmer, I'm probably going to want to focus on your C++ projects first, and then look at the remaining work in whatever time I have left. So just make that easy for me to find. So this could be a search feature on your website. You could just enable me to search your website using text tags or something like that I can do from the browser. Just something to help me find stuff quickly. In the same vein, having some layers to the presentation is very helpful. So starting out with a landing page listing your projects and key features and tech that you've used. Then maybe I mouse over it and it shows me an expanded abstract or a video snippet or a GIF or something like that. And then I can click through to learn a bit more about it for the full in-depth write-up. It just helps me home in on the projects that I'm interested in. For some students, for some portfolios, I will have time to go through everything, but for others, I might just have to read a couple of things from the abstract and note that I need to talk about it in the interview with you. Also, another suggestion, you could also pre-sort some of your portfolio if you've got quite a lot of work in there. So you could send a custom link for each application. So for example, that C++ role again, you could gather all your C++ projects into one landing page, which is the link that you provide for that application. And you could give a different landing page for a different one. Then when I navigate to your page, I find the C++ projects. So you've helped me, and then I can navigate onwards if I want to see everything else. Specifically for programmers, it's not required, but I like to see a little bit of code in a portfolio as well. It just helps give me a sense of your practical skill and background. If you can show me some code samples or a GitHub link or something like that, that would be cool. But I know that it's not for everybody. I've spoken to some hiring managers in programming and they don't want to see it. So no pressure there if you don't want to do it. The last point for this, it's not really about the portfolios, but I wasn't really sure where else to hide this. If you get a chance to show your work at a graduate show or something similar to that, make sure you go firstly. And if you while you're there, hand out business cards. As much as we want to remember everyone we've seen and everyone we've spoken to, it can be a bit overwhelming and we'll lose track. So I collect business cards when I'm there so that I know where everyone's work is, and when I'm trying to write things up for the talent acquisition team afterwards, I should have a big stack to work through. On your business card, make sure you've got your name, your contact method, and a portfolio link. QR codes are quite popular for this sort of thing as well. And the reason I have added this, just bolted this onto this random slide, is because this just happened to me recently, is a bunch of the business cards only had a QR code for the portfolio. I didn't have the text link, and I had to decode it on my phone and then type it in. So it just extended the process a little bit. So make sure that all the information is there as plain text as well as the QR code. Just makes it a lot easier for me and faster to write things up for everybody. Okay, I think that's it for general advice on portfolios. So now for a random list of mistakes that I've seen people make. Okay, so for group projects, make sure it's clear what you did and focus on that. I have had more than one occasion in an interview where somebody has put some group work in their portfolio, and I've picked out loads of cool things from the video that I wanted to talk to them about. And then we had this really awkward moment when I asked them all of these questions, and they had to tell me that they didn't do any of those things. And actually, all of the things in the video were nothing to do with them. They did something else. So make sure to avoid that. Also, broken and missing links. Make sure that we can find your portfolio and list it in the CV. The number of times I've had CVs that don't list a portfolio, but one exists, and I have to almost hunt it down. Just avoid that. And likewise, make sure all of the links inside your portfolio work as well. Make sure it's tested. So if you've made a website, make sure you've tested in Chrome, Firefox, and Edge as a minimum. If you can't do that, find a way to tell me how I should view your portfolio so I don't have to debug anything, because just again, sadly, I don't have time. And if I use up all the time trying to make your portfolio work, I might have to move on. I've also mentioned it should add to your CV, not just reiterate it. Make sure it's formatted and styled to be clear and easy to read. Again, I've had a couple of portfolios where they've chosen really extreme clashing colors, which made it really, really hard to see. So don't do that. Also, try not to make it too wordy too soon. I mentioned layers in the previous slide. So top level notes that let me drill down. It can be a little bit daunting to open a portfolio and be presented with like a dissertation level write-up, and you're not quite sure where to start. So something to break it down for me. Make sure in your videos that you annotate and explain what I'm about to see. I've seen videos that just show raw gameplay with no explanation of what I'm seeing. So for instance, you've got an AI that's making some decisions and carrying out some actions. Point them out to me with either some text that supports the video or in the video, just so that I understand what you want me to take from the video, and I know why it's cool. Again, like I said before, we're not experts in everything. For GitHub links, try to link me to the GitHub depot directly. Some people's GitHub profiles, it can be quite tricky to find a particular project or work out what your folder structure is if the depot names don't match up. And likewise, in your GitHub depots, try to put a README so I can, again, navigate the depot and I know where everything is. Also, pro tip, if you're using GitHub, it has a heat map and it shows when you check things in. The reason this is important is, again, I regularly do code challenges or another type of challenge in your CV or your portfolio. And then I click your GitHub and there's only one or two things in there and they mysteriously all appeared around the same sort of time. I know it's not a hard and fast rule, and you could definitely have been doing all this stuff offline and not checking it in, but it's just going to prompt me to look a bit harder. It calls a few things into question and I might ask you about it. For YouTube and GitHub links as well, don't forget, this is probably the biggest piece of advice amongst these slides. I will browse your channels and see what else is there, just because I'm a bit nosy. I've had a few occasions where I found other unlinked videos and things that were actually really good and helped explain some of their other work and prompted me to be even more interested in that person. And I only found it because I had a look, so now it's just a thing I do. I'm yet to find something bad when I'm poking around, but I feel like it's a matter of time. Some portfolios have gotten a bit close. So just as a warning, expect me to have a poke around, make sure everything in there remains professional and legal. And on that note, if you have social media that you're connecting to all of this, make sure all of that is professional as well. Do not embed handles to your Rage page, but do embed handles to places where I can see you posting about your projects and engaging positively with the the games industry and the things that interest you, and proofread everything. If you haven't already, start now. GitHub, ArtStation, itch.io, and YouTube are all free. So make an account and get posting. I think GitHub as well has a website builder in it, and there's a whole bunch of free web hosting online. So a quick Google should find you something. I think WordPress is another one that I've seen a lot of people use. Once you've got your first version up and running, just keep adding it to it then as you go through your career, and as you build up your projects. Some more opportunities to fill your portfolio. So if you're doing or you have finished a degree, the single most important project that I can think of that I'll be interested in, and probably the recruiters will be as well, is your final year project. It's a chance to show your skills and the direction you want to go. And it's probably the thing that you can talk about quite a lot. So be prepared to talk about it for like 20 to 30 minutes at a time. That said, if you have some time, you can do more things to push it further. Game jams are a great place to practice working with a team in a pressured environment. Challenge projects are a great ways to practice as well, particularly if you're struggling to come up with your own project ideas, which is totally fine. We all do it. We all have that trouble. I've listed a collection of jams and challenges on the right of this slide, so feel free to grab a screenshot and I can come back to it later if you miss it. You could also have a look at some freelance services like Fiverr to pick up a few small jobs to practice your skills, work with a customer, and earn a little bit of money on the side as well. Actually, one of our interns did this a few years ago, which they called out in their CV, and it turned out to be a real boon for them and set them apart, because we knew they'd already had that experience working with a customer even before coming to their internship, which was super unique. I've mentioned this a couple of times already, but show some critical reflection in your portfolio as well. Don't just show the piece itself. So what decisions did you make? Why? What were the goals? Did it succeed? How did you adapt to things not going to plan? All that good stuff. These are also really good things to call out alongside in your CV, and definitely talk about in an interview. If you can, try to go as wide with your topics and tools as well, rather than focusing on just one. There's no guarantee that the software or the engine that you've learned to use is what you're going to be using at the studio you're applying for. They might have their own internal version, so it's technically impossible for you to learn how to use it until you start there. But using a variety of tools now should mean that you learn the design language, which is a common thread amongst all of these. So when you're presented with a new one, you can learn it faster wherever you go. So a couple of quick examples might be, if you've entirely focused on learning Unreal Engine, if you came to EA, for example, we have Frostbite, so you might not be using Unreal Engine. But if you've learned the design language of game engines by using Unity, Unreal, Godot, and any others you can find, hopefully that would stand you in a better position to learn what we have and what other studios have. Also, I've listed a lot of stuff here that's extra to your studies. So I just want to take a quick second. If there's anybody here whose circumstances don't allow them to do all this extra stuff, this is specifically for you. Maybe just getting to your lectures and finishing assignments is enough of a challenge to fit around your career responsibilities or other similar circumstances. Carer responsibilities, sorry. Carer responsibilities. You're going to hear lots of people talking about side projects in the games industry as a way to demonstrate your passion, stand out from other applicants, almost like it's a necessity, like if you don't have it, you can't get in. It's true that it's definitely going to help, but maybe I'm a bit of a hippie when it comes to all of this sort of stuff, but I'm going to say to you, don't worry about it. You can turn the situation to your advantage, because you have definitely managed to achieve all this awesome work, all these grades, and complete these assignments and degree to a high standard in very short windows of time under tremendous pressure, whilst trying to care for somebody. You can make that a feature of your work. Games are fast-paced environments. Time management is crucial. You definitely have excellent time management, I can guarantee it, and you'll have better time management than most people on your course. I can't claim to have been in a similar situation by any stretch, but I didn't do any side projects either for my portfolio. Instead, I pushed all of my assignments past just hitting all of the marks and found ways to add extra twists And I've generally found, depending on your discipline and your goals, it's more efficient to push one assignment a bit further than do a bunch of little ones from scratch. So just don't worry, it'll be fine. Okay, we have a nice portfolio now. So now it's time we're going to need a CV. So how do I approach reading a CV? I get a bit more time than the recruitment team usually do, who do the initial filter, but it's still only 5 to 10 minutes maximum. So I literally underline the things that align with the job or are interesting, be that skills we're looking for, things to talk about that will give you a chance to demonstrate your knowledge and abilities, or random interesting things that are differentiating you. I'll cross-reference that with the portfolio to look for more evidence and learn more about your work, and find things that I can ask that you don't know about to really try and test you. I'm also going to look for some anomalies. So you might have a wonderful CV in many areas, but maybe your long-term daily art challenge only just started and you've not clarified that anywhere. So I'll ask you about it. Once I finish going through the CV and I've picked out enough things, wait, sorry, I'll start that again. At the end of the CV check, I'll ask, have I picked out enough things to want to interview you, and what to ask you to verify you are who you say you are. If I think yes, then I'll interview you. For our final interview, I will then do all of that again and go much deeper. So your CV has now worked. You're in the interview. My gosh. Preparation time. So my number one tip is practice. You're probably going to hear lots of other advice for interviews, but this is the big one for me. I've made the mistake so you don't have to. So anecdote time. My first interview was for my work placement. I thought I'd prepared loads of answers to the usual questions. I'd done my research, but I hadn't actually practiced delivering any of it, and I hadn't thought of any of the follow-up questions. In the interview, everything fell apart, basically, to the point that they literally told me to stop talking before I dug too deep of a hole. That was with Microsoft. I didn't get it. I was in bits. So the next interview, I went straight to the university's careers office and did a full practice interview with them until I was comfy talking about stuff. It went really well and I got it. It definitely had nothing to do with having a massive spontaneous nosebleed as they opened the door to welcome me in and spending the whole interview covered in blood. That definitely didn't make me memorable. It was the practice. Likewise, for my job at Cody's, I had practiced talking about my project so much at the University of Staffordshire's graduate exhibition that it was just natural to talk about my work and answer questions on it. So it's a huge help. I'm not sure how this applies to content creators, but programmers, I also don't see many of you doing this when I interview you, but it can be really helpful. Bring your demos with you in a runnable state, along with some source code, and mention that you have them as soon as possible, or at least some videos that you can reference as we're doing it. For my interview, we almost immediately went straight into demos, so I could show them my work as we talked about it, which is basically how you'll do demos on the job. So it was like it turned the interview into a way more practical interview, and it went really, really well. Make sure you know your portfolio well. Again, I've spoken to some people that have put things in there that I've really wanted to ask them about because it was really exciting, and they can't remember anything about it. It's never a good sign. It asks lots of really awkward questions about that work. So make sure you know what you've got in there. And lastly, be ready to answer some practical questions like writing some code on the board or designing a feature or an improvement to a feature. Every studio has their favorite flavor of this sort of question. So see if you can find out what they are. Be that, I know some studios do like a day's practical test of some sort of art test or an offline test, or 5 or 10 minutes at a whiteboard to rough something out. So just have a bit of a go at that in your own time before you go for your interview as well. A couple of insider tips for interviews. Most importantly, we want you to succeed. We're hiring because we want some help, and the sooner that we hire, the sooner we get the help. If we ask you to solve a problem in the interview, or ask you to tell us about something, please ask some clarifying questions. Don't just dive in with your answer. Some interviewers intentionally pose an incomplete question so that you have to fact find and gather some requirements, just like you will on the job in all disciplines. If you're not doing that, you might give them loads of really good stuff in your answer, but ultimately you've not answered the question they asked. So asking some clarifying questions is really, really good. When you're answering, I've had lots of people lock up and not talk us through their solution. So when I ask a question like, how would you do X? Take a second to think about it and then start brain dumping on us. So we want to see your problem solving. We want to see how you work through things, all that kind of good stuff. And also, it says that we can guide you. So if we've explained the question badly and we see you going in the wrong direction, we'll try and guide you back to the right track. So make sure you're giving us a little bit of room to ask questions ourselves and drill down on some topics, particularly if the interview is quite short. For example, you could stop and ask if we need a bit more detail on a topic before diving into the next phase of your answer. Like I said, we want you to succeed, so you can ask for feedback as you go. Try with the questions, but don't be afraid to say you don't know, because we'll help. In a similar vein, do what you need to do to think. I have seen loads of people who try to sit in silence and figure out the problem that I've asked them entirely in their head, and they've really struggled, and they'd clearly prefer to be writing things down or fidgeting with something while they're thinking about it. So I hereby give you permission to do that. Do whatever you need to do to answer the question. If you think on paper, bring a notepad and pen and think on paper. Let the interviewer know that's what you're doing, and bring them along for the ride so they can follow it. If you need to pace the room, pace the room. No need to constrain your ability unnecessarily. When you're on the job, you'll have a notepad and pen. You can go for a walk. You can play with a fidget toy. Whatever your process is, you can do it. The interview shouldn't be any different. Just communicate with the interviewer so they know what's happening, so they understand, and they don't get a little bit too freaked out while you're doing a handstand to do some maths questions. If they get it, they'll be happy to have you do it. It goes without saying at the minute, times are a bit tough in the recruitment landscape. So playing the long game is going to be key for all of you. Just don't give up. Keep trying. If you can't get into the games industry right now, try to find something else relevant to do instead. Keep your skills sharp. Continue building your CV. Continue building your portfolio. Look for something relevant to do that maybe overlaps with the games industry. Like environment artists, you could look at landscaping companies. Programmers, literally any full-time programming job will be useful. Try to fill this gap until better times come and you've got lots of experience built up, ready to go. Likewise, you also might not get into your dream studio right away, but you can definitely build towards it. At the start of your career, basically any experience you get is good experience, so just go and get it. You're already also all on the right track. You came to this talk and you've signed up for the other talks this week, so keep showing up to stuff like this. Talking to as many industry people as you can is massive. Networking is kind of what runs the games industry, so getting out there talking to people is a big deal, and I think there's a talk on that later this week. That is it. Thanks very much for listening. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully I didn't waffle on for too long, and we should have a bunch of time for questions. So I shall stop sharing.
Absolutely.
And get
Thank you so much, Chris. That was really, really, really fascinating stuff. Lots to consider there. Obviously, if anyone has any sort of questions, do feel free to pop them in the chat. I mean, one of the things that sort of strikes me, I mean, obviously your portfolio is a fantastic opportunity to sort of really personalize a lot of the detail and go into sort of more information about yourself. But I mean, in terms of sort of CVs themselves, are you generally against the idea of something a little bit more personal, or I mean, I'm just thinking of examples that I've seen in the past where there is a lot more sort of personalization rather than just like a stripped back sort of relatively bare document, basically.
No, I don't mind, because these are all chances to demonstrate what you're doing. So if anything, I would hope that based on the discipline you're aiming for, you are doing stuff like this. Like an artist's CV, I would hope is one of the most beautifully laid out CVs that I've ever seen. And that you've taken some time to make sure it's visually pleasing at the same time, because it's demonstrating your eye, your skills at the same time. Even programmers, there's some technical ability in using Word properly. So if you can use Word properly to make it look quite nice, fantastic. and do a complicated layout. So no, I think it's fine. As long as the information's there, you're not filling it up with nonsense, and like millions of adjectives and wasting space, then yeah, that's all good stuff.
No, definitely. I think that's something that I struggle with a great deal, as you've probably figured from my conversations. But yeah, no, it's a fantastic way to sort of just show off, your skills and everything like that. So, one of the things that you sort of spoke about as part of the portfolios that sort of really resonated with me was that sort of ability to sort of peek behind the scenes and show your working and everything like that, even on sort of things that are more in progress. I mean, how would you? What are some really good examples of the way people have demonstrated that that process rather than sort of a complete finished product or project? Basically, that's something that sort of I would struggle to do.
Yeah, I think that's why I put it, because we don't see it too much. So I'm struggling to think of a thing just off the top of my head. But I would imagine like if it was at the most basic level, like a text write-up about the situation with some really good subheadings that are leading me through what's going on. So maybe a a goals thing which has got maybe 2 sentences in it to tell me what the project was. And maybe a tech section which lists the tech you found. Then maybe a subheading which is conclusions, where you've said what happened, and then maybe a post-mortem where you're trying to figure out why it happened. I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to lay it out. You could also do a video presentation. I've seen a few people recently who've done really good. I mean, they're a bit long, but if it's an engaging video, then I'm in, I'll watch it. Like 5 minute, this is my project. I'm going to rattle through it with the vlog style cuts, and kind of do that YouTuber write-up. And they're actually really good because I get all the points. I understand the work you've done. And it's wicked. It's wicked.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really, really good idea, and being able to sort of understand someone's thought process as they're working through their piece. Fantastic. Well, we've had some questions in the chat. I think you covered a little bit of this, but what examples would you give of temporary jobs for game designers that couldn't necessarily break into the industry immediately? Maybe specifically for sort of on the design side of things. You obviously mentioned sort of potentially landscaping for artists, but yeah, crack on.
I might have to ask somebody who's a little bit more qualified for that. But the things that come to mind, speaking to our designers about their career history, a lot of them spent some time in QA. So that's a really good place to, I mean, QA is annoyingly got a bit of a temporary contract culture about it. But it's a good place to get in because you're just within the industry, then you're talking to people, and you're kind of coming at the design from the point of view of how to break it. So when you actually do get to the point of designing something, you'll hopefully build something stronger because you've spent so much time breaking them that you can kind of QA it as you go. There's also lots of like community-driven game projects that you can go and join. So there's mod projects are a great place to go and come up with some systems, work with a bunch of people. Sadly, I don't think you're going to earn any money doing it, but still a really good place to go and try and pick up some experience and more things for your portfolio. And then I think probably breaking it down into some specifics is the next place to go. So if you are specifically a UI UX designer, then web design, user experience in other things is all very applicable. Really kind of what's the word? Traditional game design is I'm struggling to think of a very specific job, but I think at the core of it, you're trying to make something for somebody. You're trying to identify some requirements. Obviously, it has to be fun. That's the unique bit of the games industry. But you're trying to make something for somebody. So anything that lets you do that, I guess, would be my suggestion.
Oh, that makes sense. That's a really, really good couple of suggestions there. So Freya's asked here, in terms of sort of soft skills that are really, really desirable on a good CV, maybe as well sort of opportunities sort of to highlight these. I mean, I find talking about some of the softer skills quite hard to sort of demonstrate, to point at sort of meaningful examples of. So maybe suggestions that you've seen in the past where that's worked really well.
Yeah, I think the best way with these is to evidence them, because again, they can come a little bit. Some of these cookie cutter phrases that you'll see in CVs, like, I have a complete understanding of this. Like, well, do you really? I'm going to ask lots of questions now to try and find out if you do have a complete understanding of this. But if you say something like, I have a complete understanding of these systems in the game, again, I might question it, but then you can follow it up with, because I was the QA for this feature, or I designed it, or something like that. So evidence-based stuff. So soft skills, teamwork, collaboration, communication. Talk about the times you're doing it. So game jams are a great place to practice it, and you can convey it through your game jam write-up. You can talk about a specific instance or a specific problem you solved, or a key time that you demonstrated that particular skill. So maybe you wanted to mention something about leadership. So you could maybe suggest that, yeah, I became the lead person on the game jam, and then state how you led. So you would say something like running feedback sessions, or being the person who with the deciding vote, or just generally supporting the rest of the team with stuff. So being a sounding board for them, because being a lead isn't necessarily, or in fact, most of the time, it's not just telling people what to do. That's not leadership. It's facilitating them to do the cool stuff that needs to happen for the project to come together. So you can talk about those times, and we'll talk about those in the interview, as long as you've mentioned that you've given us the concrete example. You've said, I've demonstrated this skill on this thing. Like, cool, I'll ask you about that in the interview. And probably, to be honest, even if you put the most immaculate thing in the CV, which perfectly explains everything, I'll probably ask about it again anyway, just to try and get a little bit more detail, then more with where there's a bit more room to talk about it than the maybe 3 lines you have in a CV.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's really, really helpful. We've got another question in the chat here. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll read it out, but I'll keep it private.
You can.
So someone's here been doing community management for about 4 to 5 years, but not in the games industry at the moment. They're unsure of what they can do to make their portfolio or CV stand out. I think it seems that they've been working with some big companies, but can't necessarily prove it or demonstrate it, as it was sort of confidential under NDA. Ironically, we were joking about this earlier, weren't we?
Yeah.
So yeah, what would you? Is there a way around this? Is there an understood way to speak about these things within the industry that doesn't mean that you have to, disclose things that you shouldn't be disclosing?
Yeah, that's the thing. The industry knows NDAs are a thing, and they know that we've all signed them in other places we've worked. My suggestion that I give to a lot of people is try to find a way to talk about those things in more general terms. So a programmer might not be able to. So if I was to talk about some of my past work, then I specifically wouldn't be able to tell you how the damage systems for Dirt Rally 2 worked. But I could definitely tell you how hard it was to build them, who I had to work with to build them, how we iterated on it. I might be able to tell you about some of the bugs that existed and how we nailed those, how the iteration process worked, how I demoed it, who I demoed it to, how often I did it. Was there a specific performance element to the code that I had to solve. Again, I might not be able to say specifically how I solved it, but I might be able to name some higher level techniques like data-oriented design, because then that's me telling the interviewer, I know what data-oriented design is. They don't have to ask me specifically about, tell me how the damage system for Dirt Rally 2 works. They go, okay, you've said data-oriented design. Can you give me another example you can talk about with data-oriented design? And you could say, no, sadly not. But let's try and make up an example now on the spot so I can prove to you that I do know how to do that. And we get the sense through kind of how you talk about it, I guess, that you do know what you're talking about, and we try and find a way to do it in more general terms. So I think that probably holds true for all the other disciplines. If the entire existence of the project and the fact that you spoke to that company is a secret, that's quite tricky. I would hope that it's not that secret, but I could see some cases where it might be. But again, you might be able to put something in your CV like unannounced project with a company covered by NDA, and you could list this again, the stuff you can talk about, what skills you used in that role, what your responsibilities were in general terms, because we don't know who these people are and you'll never tell us. So it's a secret. So all their secrets are safe, but you have managed to demonstrate your skills.
I think as well, these skills are, this is experience that you do have, and so being able to talk about it in some way is crucial. Otherwise, not including this is well, essentially, it's not helpful. So yeah, having that experience listed in some respect is important.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
It can be if we see anomalous gaps in CVs as well, we might also prompt us to ask what was going on, and then you'll have to say it was an NDA'd thing, and like, oh, okay, so you could just put NDA'd work for these years. Like, all right, I've definitely seen it, one or two CVs where it was very clear that we can't talk about anything that they did, but they put the high level line, I worked for these people. I can't talk about anything I did there. We need to keep it to practical examples. Like, okay, from the rest of the CV, we're convinced we will find practical examples. We will generate some more things in the interview to help you demonstrate what was going on, because very clearly this is a thing that we all just know we can't talk about. So we're going to play it safe for everybody and not even try and walk the line.
Wonderful. No, that's really, really helpful and reassuring as well. That's good.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time today. Really,
No
really
worries.
appreciate it. It's been genuinely fascinating, and I hope everyone here has found it useful and enjoyed it. And I'm pleased that everyone's got a chance to ask some questions. So,
Good.
so yeah, Chris, huge thanks here, and yeah, really appreciate everyone's time today. It's been fantastic.
No worries. Thanks very much. Good luck, everybody. Hopefully this was all very helpful.